Witches and mortals seldom do mix, but when mixed marriage is on the cards, insanity pursues with the classic 60s sitcom Bewitched, with your co-hosts, Vicky Ray, Rod Labby, and Keith Chowell. Witches have never been so exposed before.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and this is our first episode for Bewitched. We're covering Season 1, Episodes 1 through 4. And before we get started, let's find out who's with us today. We have Jesse Fultz. Hello, Jesse.
Hey, everybody.
And Vicky Ray.
Hello, people.
And myself, Keith Chago. And before we get started, let's find out what we've been up to since last time we spoke. So, Jesse, what have you been up to last time we spoke to you?
And it better be good because you've been missing in action.
I've been making some, app designs as a digital artist and working on some of my own stuff too. Just kind of all over the place. Also writing a bit. What else? What else have I been up to? I think that's kind of it. I just kind of go back and forth from all of those because, quarantine and stuff. Nothing else to do.
Baby, you're stuck in New York. I keep thinking of that. You're up there with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And what about yourself, Vix? What are you up to?
Not a whole lot. Just helping out with Asher. I'm kind of like one of those stay-at-home grandmas these days. But we got that BMX thing still going on. State championships next month, Gold Cup next weekend. But I did catch up with Amazon's The Boys. And I guess there's a new episode out today, and I can't wait to be able to get it because I'm just so happy with how it turned out thus far. I'm really liking it. And if anybody really likes the antithesis of superheroes and Marvel Comics, you're going to love this. It's just brilliant. Can't sing its praises enough. And oddly enough, I was babysitting Ash as per usual. My daughter works and goes to school. And I started watching the Divergent series, the trilogy. And I found myself loving it and really not feeling satisfied by the third movie. What was it? The Allegiant? Because I want to see the next movie. But it's been some years. I don't know if they're going to make another one. But it was really good. I enjoyed it. And I'm just kind of hoping there'd be a fourth one coming out. But I guess we'll see. I haven't heard anything.
That was like a follow-up to Hunger Games, but didn't really catch on.
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
So.
Yeah, it didn't catch fire. Ha, 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 ha. Get it?
It didn't catch fire, but God, it's so relevant in today's society because I'm just waiting to be split into factions at this point.
It's kind of true, though. It is kind of true. It wasn't like the best movie, but it definitely is relatable right now. Yeah.
I think they got caught up in when they started, Hollywood went after, let's do a lot of young adult fiction, so Hunger Games kind of spurred it, and Allegiance and Maze Runner came out. And
right.
I liked Maze Runner. Maze Runner's awesome.
Yeah, I like the Maze Runner a bit better, and I thought the finishing through that was well done. So
I like all of them. That post-apocalyptic shit. I just think because we're so close to the apocalypse at this point in our lives, we've had it all. God is pissed.
Which we'll be looking at on Nature versus Man for a 2-for-1 next week.
Definitely.
But you know what I feel like we're close to? The Purge.
I know, and there's so many people I would love to take out.
Just remember, they can take you out too. So
that's right, but I bet you I'm in Texas. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, myself, I finished watching The Boys where we are for, I think there was 3 episodes, so I watched the today. I did watch Netflix sequel to The Babysitter, and this one's called The Babysitter Killer Queen.
I had that on my watch list and totally forgot about it.
Yeah,
but wait, that's the second one. Wait, is that where? Okay, she comes back and she's like not a cop, but she's one of those people that help people with PTSD who've been attacked.
No. The babysitter basically is, the first one is basically about this babysitter who comes in with her friends, and and I don't want to give too much away, but it's very gory.
I got it mixed up with the Stranger Calls. Okay, so it's the babysitter.
And the second one is it takes place 3 years later. And I don't want to give anything away because there's some nice surprises. It's directed by McG. McG, you probably know from Supernatural and the Charlie's Angels movie series, the first lot. So
I watched the last Charlie's Angels. I was kind of surprised. I like Kristen Stewart in this for a change. She actually kind of, shed her facade, or what everybody was saying that, she always had that same look on her. But she kind of come out of her comfort zone, it looked like, in that movie.
And I finished reading Treasure Island today for next month.
Boy, you are such an overachiever.
No, I when I have things to do, I like to get them done ahead of schedule, so I'm just ready. Because when it comes to these books, it's best to have them read before your time runs out.
I was just starting it today.
So it's good. I enjoyed it. I thought it's very good, but we'll get into that next month.
Treasure Island.
Absolutely. I actually liked that book, and it's not near as big as The Count of Monte Cristo.
No, yeah.
But
we still got the sea. We're still keeping with the sea theme, though. That's good.
Yeah, that's true. True.
Man versus the elements. So, well, that brings us now to Bewitched. Bewitched is an American television sitcom fantasy series originally broadcast for 8 seasons on ABC from September 17th, 1964 to March 25th, 1972. It's about a witch who marries an ordinary mortal man and vows to lead the life of a typical suburban housewife. The show was popular, finishing at the second-rated show in America during its debut season, staying in the top 10 for its first 3 seasons and ranking in 11th place for both seasons 4 and 5. The show continues to be seen throughout the world in syndication on recorded media. Bewitched was created by Soul Sachs under executive director Harry Ackerman and starred Elizabeth Montgomery as Samantha Stevens, Dick York as Darren Stevens, her husband, and Agnes Moorehead as Endora. And one more bit of note that probably we should talk about. I mean, of course, since this is our first episode dealing with Bewitched, we'll get all this out of the way, and then we'll start talking about the episodes. Production and broadcasting notes are: Soul Sachs received credit as creator of the show. He wrote the pilot of Bewitched and was not involved with the show after the pilot. Creator Sachs, executive producer Harry Ackerman, who was married, and director William Asher, who was married to Elizabeth Montgomery at the time, started rehearsals for the pilot on November 22nd, 1963. This coincided with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Asher felt personally affected by the event as he knew Kennedy. He had produced the 1962 televised birthday party where Marilyn Monroe sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." The pilot concerned the occult, destabilization, and the conformist life of an upwardly mobile advertising man. We're going to run our podcast a little bit differently with Bewitched because Bewitched is not a soap opera like Dark Shadows or Soap that we'll be covering this year, and because there's not a continuing storyline. So what we'll do is break down each episode, and we'll call this segment Bewitching Going On's Which Witch is Which. So, episode 1, in the pilot episode, strangers Samantha and Darren meet one another by bumping into each other several times. They fall in love and get married. On their wedding night, Samantha's witch mother, Endora, visits Samantha and is shocked to learn her new husband is mortal and predicts the marriage will not last. Samantha tells Darren she's a witch and proves it. Darren is shocked but realizes he loves Samantha and cannot give her up, and he tells her he wants her to learn to live like a mortal. Later at a dinner party, Samantha uses her powers to get back at Darren's condescending ex-girlfriend, Sheila. Nancy Kovacs, the character Sheila, was originally intended to be an occasionally recurring nemesis of Darren and Samantha, but did not appear again until the 4th season episode Snub in the Grass. Jean Blakely's character of Dave, a drinking companion of Darren's, would recur very occasionally in season 1 through 4, as would Paul Baskalov's bartender character, who at various times was credited as Al, Joe, Pete, or Max. C. Lindsay Workman would also appear in a few later episodes as Dr. Copland, the title character he plays here, as well as playing other roles throughout the series run. The first few episodes, to episodes 4, are narrated by uncredited Jose Ferreira, Academy Award winner, who would narrate episodes 2 and 4 before being dropped from the show. So, Jesse, what are your thoughts of episode 1, I, Darren, Take This Witch, Samantha?
It's actually one of my favorite episodes. I mean, the whole first few seasons are my favorite, but season 1 specifically because it has more of that old Hollywood glamour, I think, of like the 50s. It feels very 50s to me compared to the rest of the seasons. I think season 3 is like the cutoff for that whole vibe, and then it kind of goes into something else. I really think it's hilarious because, it's a very simple comedy, like the little tropes that they use in the beginning, like where the narrator's explaining they bumped into each other. And they bumped into each other, and they had lots in common. Radio, trains and just all this
Yeah,
funny
where they're
stuff.
kissing in every scene.
Yeah,
That's all they
yeah.
had in common with
That's
the
pretty
trains
much
and the
what
radio.
young people do. I mean, even today, like if you're in high school, I mean, it's a little more risque in high school nowadays, but I don't. But yeah, I love the whole first episode. The pilot's my favorite episode. Well, actually, for the batch of episodes that we did, I think 4 might have been my favorite. But the pilot is definitely on one of my favorites list, especially Endora. Darren is kind of obnoxious. I think I'll say that probably every episode.
He's kind of a shit, isn't he?
He is. He's not supportive. He doesn't.
To be honest, though, I don't mind Darren. The thing is that I think what makes that work is that, first of all, you need a person to play the buffoon. You need the person.
Right.
You have Samantha's the straight person,
The literal buffoon.
But saying that, I think what really makes this work is that you do believe that Darren and Samantha love each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They have that. I don't know, what their chemistry was offset or anything like that. Unfortunately, they both passed. But they had this chemistry between them and then when they look at each other and they kiss each other and no matter what, you can feel the love coming from them. And it just emanates from the screen. And I think that...
Oh, I know.
If you didn't have that kind of chemistry, this wouldn't work.
Yeah, even though I don't necessarily care for all of, Darren's choices and stuff, I do think Dick York is a wonderful actor and he's perfect for the role. I think, the actor that they have later, which I won't get into too much, but isn't as great, even though he was, he brought his own, little thing to the table. But, he wasn't even going to be the original actor. It was going to be what is his name? I have it written down because I don't quite remember.
Sargent?
No, the original one. Like the producers were originally going to pick a guy named Richard Crenna, who was from a show called The Real McCoys.
I know exactly what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Which I thought was an interesting choice. Totally different. That would have been an interesting thing. And then also for Samantha, they were going to pick an actress named Tammy Grimes, which doesn't have the same appeal as Elizabeth Montgomery at all. I think Elizabeth Montgomery, because I've seen her in things before that, like one of the Twilight Zone episodes, and in that episode they didn't even speak, but she has such a presence and this kind of innocent, very subtle, like she has like a kind of sexuality that's very innocent but very subtle, and I think that's what Samantha's character needed. Also, Samantha wasn't even going to or Elizabeth wasn't going to be part of the show unless they changed the name, because originally it was going to be Cassandra, but then she didn't. I don't remember who suggested Samantha, but it was changed to Samantha, and then I guess she was okay with that. It's rumored that she wasn't going to be part of it. Hold on. I think she said she wasn't going to be a part of the show at all unless they changed the name. It was kind of a big deal.
I think that Samantha works perfectly. At least, now it's kind of overdone where you have the neo-pagan movement. But back then, so you know what I'm talking about. So Samantha kind of really fits. Cassandra wouldn't have quite fit near as well. Cassandra kind of would work for more like a Xena series,
True.
more than Samantha would. But the one thing, I mean, you have to call it out first. And I was talking to Keith earlier about, you got to call it out. This is the 60s. Life was different then.
True.
Nuclear family was nuclear family. Women mostly did stay home and take care of hearth and home. And, there really wasn't this dislike of it so much as there was, with up and coming feminism, which I'm not bashing feminism completely. But I mean, if you say that, this is a bad display of feminism, which is not, and I don't think a lot of people think that at the time. But when you think of watching Bewitched, you have some very strong women that, really are controlling all of the situations, like Endora. Now, who wants to fuck with Endora? Right from the episode 1, she's going to be a strong antagonist throughout the whole series.
Endora is one of my favorite characters. I mean, she might be my favorite character overall.
She's perfect for the role. Absolutely perfect.
Oh, I know. She has the best lines. And something I would say about like the first 4 episodes, there are moments when you actually feel like you're watching like a series that's very that's much more serious or more dramatic just because of her stage presence.
She has a stage
like,
presence completely.
an immense presence. Oh yeah, and you feel like you're watching a movie, like when she's on for a few scenes. You know, most of the time she's the comedic relief. You know, she says the funniest things about Darren or about being human. Her lines are the best. I love all of her lines. They're so dramatic and poetic. You know, when she's talking about, the life of a witch. It's amazing.
Right. But yet she loves her daughter. You know, you could tell that the relationship and the chemistry between them. And, it's just, you knew there was going to be a problem when she says she's going to be the best wife and she's going to try not to practice witchcraft. You know, right then it's going to be a shit show.
But the whole thing about, the good thing about Endora, though, the thing is that she loves her daughter and she wants her daughter to be happy, but at the same time, she doesn't want her daughter to lose herself in that, in the love that she's going. So you have this protected mother that goes on that works very, very well. What's also quite interesting about the Endora character is that she kind of gives a commentary, and it's quite interesting because when we go on later in the series, you're going to see different points of view coming out here. And Bewitched, if you look at Bewitched, came out in 1964, and it's basically an allegory of interracial marriages.
Exactly.
That's basically what it is. About two people from the different sides of whatever track you're looking at, and basically coming together. And the thing is that Endora would be the typical point of view for one of that. Now, we are going to see other points of view coming through later on in the series, which makes it quite interesting. It brings that forward. And I think when you look at it, and considering at this time in television, at 1964, when basically, you were owned by the advertising dollar, and you only had, 3 networks at that time, and it's all run by advertising. And the thing is that they were able to get away with what they get away with, considering the time that you're in. And so when you look at it, and the thing is, okay, maybe you can watch it and you can look at it on one level, but if you look at it from a deeper level, it really does hit all the points that it's trying to hit.
That's true for that time, especially because, like, if you watch this show versus like the modern version of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, that's not something you could ever get away with. That's something that in recent times we've been able to pull off, but even today, like if that was on regular TV, that would still be controversial. But even Samantha's birthday, June 6th, had satanic overtones. There was controversy over that. And I thought that was really fascinating because it's like, this is such a tame show, but just even the idea of the occult being involved, and I can understand why there would be some of that in the first season because Endora does bring on more of that witchy, like in a serious way. It feels more serious whenever she's on, and then you add more of her family, like Marie's. And I think in the earlier seasons, it feels more serious. Later on, it feels like the witchcraft is played exclusively for laughs, nothing serious. They get sick with polka dots all over their face, just kind of crazy Dr. Seuss kind of magic. Like, it doesn't feel very serious at all. But in the first few episodes, like, it's very magical, and that's why I think I like it so much because, I wish we could have explored more of, like, Samantha's life and see more of a struggle with that just because it's so fascinating, and I love seeing all the crazy characters like her mother, her father, her aunt, and, Uncle Arthur, and all of those fun characters. But it definitely did hit a lot of points, and I think it was a huge step forward, even for strong female characters, because you could only take a certain step forward before it was like too much for the people at the time, because it did, I think, pave the way for other shows, other characters, other ideas, because you can see Bewitched has a huge impact on even TV shows that are being made today. Like, you can't tell me Sabrina didn't have any influence from Bewitched, because Bewitched was their
first. Think about Charmed, all of that stuff.
Exactly. Charmed is another example.
This was a predecessor for all of that. And when you think about it, Keith really kind of spot on that, because this is the 60s. And, I don't know if people know they were watching an analogy of interracial marriage or mixed marriage, because 3 years later, I believe 67, I believe it was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier came out. And so it was at this time when things were just starting to turn, maybe. You know,
Well, I guess, I mean,
and so
you can also look at it, though, that you also have rich marrying poor.
true.
Which has been, or Romeo and
Darren's
Juliet,
little
the
bride.
Capulets, and the Montagues.
Right.
It's been going. It's all through the period of time, basically, that two people from opposite ends of the
opposite
spectrum.
worlds.
Well, Samantha really, really needs that hairdresser and that dressmaker, because her hair is just hard to manage. And
Oh my God!
I love that dinner scene. I love that so much.
You knew that was coming. Women are, women are always saying we need other women to survive, but women are so petty to other women, and I will say this to anybody's face: women do more for the patriarchy than men do for the patriarchy, because women are so petty, and you see that, when what's her name, Sheila. Starts with you need a dressmaker, and you got the hair that's, obviously hard to work with.
He does wonders for hard to
manage. And she's
hair.
flirting with her husband, sits her at one end of the table and at the other end of the table.
That honestly pissed me off. Darren was literally sitting there. Totally passive. You could tell he knew exactly what she was doing by the expressions on his face, constantly looking back over at Samantha, doing absolutely nothing, saying absolutely nothing.
What's he going to do? Because he knows his wife is
could
like
politely
a magical...
But when I kind of looked at that scene, sometimes I kind of wondered, did Sheila have an account where he works? Because she just breezes in. I know that.
They don't really say much about it, do they?
But she owns a company, and she's a successful businesswoman.
Right.
So,
what's funny?
Darren's sitting there because basically, he's also the advertising executive for Sheila's company, maybe.
Yeah.
Darren does a lot of sucking up. He just does.
But that's almost why I do think.
But men do that. Let's be honest. If you see men, and basically it's like, they'll be there with their wife, and all of a sudden, like, a pretty girl pays them a lot of attention. It's like the wife doesn't exist anymore, and that is a standard situation. It hasn't changed to this day, sort of thing.
I suppose, but I think everyone gets upset in that situation. I mean, most reasonable people. But I think it's super funny because I kept noticing Sheila talking about just coming from Nassau. She kept pronouncing it that way, Nassau. And I was thinking of I Dream of Jeannie, which is similar. And Larry Hagman's character, Tony Nelson, dated a very similar female. I'm like, what if they're the same ex? What if that's what brings the two together? Because why would she be at Nassau? Was she flirting with Larry Hagman's character too?
About the same time, wasn't it?
No, she wasn't actually saying NASA though. NASA is the space. She's saying
Nassau, the island.
The island, because this is supposed to take place in Connecticut.
Goofy man.
Connecticut or Massachusetts. The state keeps changing, as we'll find out.
Okay.
So
I just thought it was funny.
She was trying to talk about the romantic beach. I mean, and how she's pretty much insinuating that Darren and her had slept together or played footsie in some capacity. There's sex going on without saying there's sex going on, basically.
But you also have to know that Nassau Island is where old money is as well.
True.
And Sheila's from old money as well.
All of those islands down there got so.
It's where the Kennedys hang out. That and Martha's Vineyard. So that's what.
Hyannisport, yeah.
Now, I have to sit there and say that I found quite interesting that, we have a pilot that's done in 3 acts. So we have the first act where they get married in the lovey-dovey, and then we get the second act where Darren, Endora has her fun with Darren. And then Darren has to sort out how he's going to proceed with his marriage with this woman he loves so much, but she's a witch. And I love the thing at the bar where he's telling people about his wife, and he goes, "Oh, she's a witch," and he goes, "Well, yeah, see what I wake up to.
You should see my
wife." And I thought that was quite interesting. And I know that we're going to be playing on this a little bit more, when especially we get to like the mother-in-law and sort of things at this point. But it's interesting that Darren hasn't yet met his mother-in-law yet, which we will come to later on.
Right.
But that was quite interesting that basically Samantha's keeping those two apart at the moment, even though Endora, doesn't care for Darren and you can't remember what his name is, which is quite fun. Dennis. So I think that
Dennis Durwood.
But what I like about Endora is that you know that she knows what his name is, but she just does it on purpose.
Yeah.
Because Agnes Moorehead. I love Agnes Moorehead. Even, when you see her in Citizen Kane, she's part of the old Orson Welles theater group as well. And then when you see her like in films like Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte and other films that you do see her in.
She was quite the actress, really.
Oh, and The Misfits. She's brilliant in that as well. But I don't think anyone else could ever play Endora.
No.
I don't think there's another actress like that.
I think Shirley MacLaine kind of came close, but no one could ever have that dramatic.
But it was missing that blue eyeshadow or something. I don't know what it was missing, but she didn't quite feel it.
Agnes Moorehead packed a punch, and I think that's what Shirley MacLaine was missing. There wasn't that punch. It was more of like a more hesitant version of Endora, but I think Agnes Moorehead was just, I don't know how to describe her, but she definitely packed a punch. That's the only way I can think of to describe her. And she's one of my favorite characters throughout the series. I mean, I think later on you see less and less of her as the series progresses, which is really sad to me. But I heard she didn't even want to really do this show and thought it wasn't going to last. And that's the only reason she agreed to doing it to begin with, because she didn't consider herself a TV actor. She considered herself to do, films and stuff like that. And then she was stuck for a while doing it.
I mean, the reason why she did this, because she didn't think it would be picked up.
There was a moment where Darren seems to break the fourth wall, and I think that's the only time this happens. He looks directly at the camera and says, So what if my wife's a witch?
Right.
All married couples have to make some adjustments. And I thought that was kind of interesting because that's the only time they do it. And Samantha almost did it later on, but not really, because she just said, maybe I'll tape her off, but didn't look at the camera. She just kind of said it to herself. So I thought they were going to do it again there, but they don't ever do that any other time in the series. But it kind of reminded me of like Looney Tunes, where Bugs Bunny looks into the camera and says something snide, and then the music plays.
I think commentary at that point was needed, though, because this has to. These episodes, the first 4, initially set up what was going to be all these seasons that follow. You have the antagonist and the protagonist, and you have all the differences of both worlds coming together and clashing.
Okay, that brings us to episode number 2, Be Ever So Mortgage. Got some few notes here before we go into what the episode's about. The 1959 Columbia picture film Gidget was filmed on location at a real house in Santa Monica at 267 18th Street. The blueprint design of this house was later reversed and replicated as the house facade attached to the existing garage on the back lot of Columbia Branch. This was the house seen on Bewitched. The patio and living room sets seen on Columbia's Gidget Goes to Rome were soon adapted for the permanent Bewitched set for 1964. The interior of the Stevens house can be seen substantially unaltered in the Jerry Lewis film, Hook, Line, and Sinker from 1969. The set was also used several times in the television series Gidget and I Dream of Jeannie, as well as the television film Brian's Song from 1971. It was also used as setting for the opening Tay sequence in the final episode of the first season of another Screen Gems property, The Monkees, and the episode of The Fantastic Journey. The house served as Dr. Bellow's house in I Dream of Jeannie and was seen in an episode of Home Improvements when Tim Taylor took tool time on location in the house of Vinnie's mother to repair a gas leak in the basement furnace, with a second gas leak at the kitchen stove, unbeknownst to Tim. The Stevens house was also featured in the Fruit of the Loom Christmas commercial, and it was used as Clark Griswold's boyhood home in the old home movies in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. On the Columbia Studio backlot, the Kravitz house was actually down the street from the Stevens house exterior. Both houses' exterior doors open to an unfinished 18 by 15 foot or 5 by 5 by 4.6 meter entry, as the interiors were shot on a studio sound location elsewhere. A front porch set replicating the porch of the backlot house was created as well. From 1964 through 1966, the Kravitz house was the same as used in the Donna Reed show. Beginning with season 3, color episodes in 1966, the Kravitz house sets were the same as what would be years later be featured as the Partridge Family home. Production and filming for Bewitched were based in Los Angeles, and although the setting is assumed to be New York, several episodes featured wide-angle exterior views of the Stevens neighborhood, showing a California landscape with mountains in the distance. Another example of questionable continuity regarding the location can be seen.
Were they
So-
recycling the set? Is that what you were saying?
They always recycle the set.
I know
Same
they do,
thing-
but I didn't know they recycled it with the Partridge Family. That's interesting.
Or I Dream of
actually.
Jeannie, which was on a different network.
Well, actually, yeah, but you can tell that's definitely the same setup, like the Bellows house with the stairs and the door. It's all the same. So I caught that years ago. But yeah.
Now, episode 2, Be It Ever So Mortgage. When Samantha and Darren purchased their first home together, Samantha and Endora used their magic to see what it would be like to have it fully finished. But their noisy neighbor, Gladys Kravitz, first premiering in this episode, played by Alice Pearce, witnesses the acts of magic and becomes shocked and hysterical. And of course, we get our first view of Abner, played by George Tobias. So, Vicky, what are your thoughts of this episode?
Well, I like that they introduce the characters. You're starting to get into these long-standing characters that are going to be, remember how we always talk about Alfred Hitchcock, and he's always got those extra characters in the background that kind of really make, that bring something to the screen, because they have this perfect symbiosis or whatever with the show. And you got this beautifully, happily married couple that want to do, well, actually, in essence, they go to look at the house, and this is how it starts. This poor woman is watching her and her Endora look at the house, and they're just trying on bushes and shutters and flower beds and extra trees and, what weren't there, and they keep appearing and disappearing. So there you have, Mrs. Kravitz getting into like, oh my God, there's neighbors across the road, and she's already starting to see things, which is going to set up for the hilarity of many shows to follow after that. But, Endora's, trying to be involved in her daughter's marriage or show some kind of support.
Kudos to her for that.
In her own way, she's trying to show her support, because she doesn't believe in this laborious mortal living. We're animals and we do everything and we're mundane. Why plant your own flowers, when you just zap them in there? I just don't understand, why Darren's not excited about having his wife being a witch. Twinkle here and twinkle there,
I'd be excited. Heck, I would be excited.
I would be very excited.
But I think that also comes into the simple fact that, if you're at this point, if you're the husband, you're the provider, and you want, I guess you don't want, I guess you don't want your wife to be supporting you. It's your job to be supporting the wife.
It's a pride issue, especially.
I guess that, yeah, because if you think about it, yeah, that does make sense. I didn't think about it until you said that, actually. But when you think about it being that time when, men were like the sole providers, and he expected her to be the stay-at-home wife. And it's like, she doesn't need him. Like, she really doesn't need him to do that, to be the provider. So she kind of has to, give up her powers in a sense. She's not like actually giving them up right now, but she does have to kind of let them hang on in the background while she kind of submits and becomes the housewife.
That word, you said that word. No. No, you did not just say that word. The one thing I find, and I know that most people, even men, find it annoying that this is part of her being. And it's all give and take in any relationship, as all of us know. But I mean, to totally have to give up that which is your magical side. And let's face it, that is what she is. And it's it's going to be hard. Because it's going to be hard.
Yeah, because that's how Bewitched set it up, was that it's part of their nature. They're born into it. It's like
I was born that way,
Yeah, they weren't. It's not something like where a human practices magic and they have abilities. They were it's part of their nature, as if they're like star beings with magical powers. Like, that's kind of how Endora explains it. So you do kind of feel like I don't remember exactly what happens later on, but you do get the feeling while watching it, like, oh, this is gonna, if they're born this way, it has to have some kind of pressure build up at some point later on where something bad happens because she's not using her powers.
It's just about every episode something happens.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, another thing you have to remember is that Samantha let slip that she's a lot older than we think she is. She's like hundreds of years old.
Well, Endora's like thousands of years old. Well, she's talking about Greeks, and
I heard she's based off of the Witch of Endor from the Bible, And that's why she's called Endora, because
Right.
Witch of Endor, Endora. So she might be biblical times old, that's thousands and thousands of years. Maybe even before that.
You know what I like about this episode, though, is like you forget that Darren, rewatching this, you forget that Darren and Samantha were living in a flat.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, then also now you're seeing this. I mean, let's face it, this house is iconic. It's one of the most iconic houses throughout television history. And I think the only ones that you can probably equal that to is probably the Brady Bunch or the Waltons or something like that.
Yep.
And so now it's like, and it's quite magical to watch them like go to this house at the first thing. And the thing is, and this is what's quite clever, is that basically you have a blank canvas of a house, and then, without skipping too far ahead here, we're going to actually see this house blossom to what our memory is going to be of it.
Right.
But what I love is that, Darren goes off to work and Dora pops in and goes, "Oh, I'm going to go look at the house." And, you got Endora. But then Endora goes with Samantha. And it's like, Endora's kind of cold, but then she goes, well, then they do the decoration that you're talking about we can put a tree there, the tree here. No, I think it's better over one tree and everything like this. And then Samantha zaps it away to Endora's dismay. It's like, okay, fine. If this makes you happy, I'm going to go along with it. And then they go inside the house. And this is probably the first time that you see the real love that Endora has for her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I love that. I love seeing them interact that way. And that's how Endora actually means well. But I don't think they bring it up because it's a sitcom enough why this, the difference between Samantha being an immortal and Darren being an immortal, why that's such a struggle for Endora, because she's planted as the antagonist, almost the villain of the sitcom series.
I wouldn't say she's a villain. I'd say
but she's more so.
I would say she's like the over elaborated mother-in-law. Everybody knows what that is,
But she's also the point of reason, though. Endora's the point of reason.
Yeah,
she is.
And if you look at it, it's quite funny because you got Samantha and Darren in this newfound love, and they're newlyweds, and they're totally encaptured with each other. But Endora is the voice of reason.
Well, she's thousands of years old. She should be the voice of reason. She has greater knowledge than any of them understand, and she knows things are bound to happen. But also,
Darren's going to get older.
Yeah, and she involves that, but then also her pettiness because she just doesn't like immortals. So she's kind of prejudiced against mortals. Did I say immortals a minute ago? I hope I did mess up.
Well, that's setting up, it's just like what Keith says, is this is kind of like an analogy of racial tension or mixed, families back then. Well, let's face it, it was not seen well back then.
But also, look at how mortals have treated witches through history.
Oh, yeah. Tell me.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess Bewitched, I think it's so timeless in a sense because I think anyone can relate to that because you not only have like mixed interracial marriages, but you have like, a lot of gays gravitated towards this show as well. They still do.
Well, think about the thousands, probably back then. I don't know if the scores of thousands or whatever, but personally, I know many pagan peoples and people who practice, what you might call the craft or whatever, that were so elated to see something like this come out, where they honestly, because people like that actually hide, they still do, because you can't go to work and say, oh, this, that, or the other thing, something like that. People will frown upon it. Maybe not so much now.
Yeah, so it has literal.
To this day, they still love this show because wow, somebody, recognized that this. Not that we can all twinkle our nose and that,
so it's both a metaphor, but then also a very literal thing that happens that anyone can gravitate towards. And I think it also has religious,
like an unknown population.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it reaches people in different ways from all different backgrounds because it can be both a metaphor, but also very literal depending on, who you are and what your background story is. And honestly, it's such a simple thing.
Before I forget, who was this marketed for? I know soap operas, women. Was this marketed more towards females watching?
It had a 9 o'clock. It must have been for parents because it came out at 9 o'clock at night. Children,
right? So it was a prime time episode.
So these are prime time. I mean, another thing that I find quite interesting is if you look at it from this point of view as well, that you have Endora and you have, and you have the idea of a witch and what a witch is. Mm-hmm. And then you get, and when Darren comes to the house and Samantha tells him that you love the house, he goes, oh, you just miss Mother. Oh, I would like to meet her. She goes, she zapped out. And then basically the stereotyping that Darren does about witches comes into this as well. The stereotyping of something that you're not familiar with. And that was quite an interesting thing to view as well during this episode, is that even though they're not harsh stereotypings or anything like that, but there is a stereotyping that does take place in this episode. Well, it does take place in the previous.
Well, you're thinking of the Wizard of Oz's witch, with the green face and the work
riding a broom and stuff like that.
I think there's that, but there's also the stereotype about mother-in-laws also, I think, because that's become a stereotype too. I don't know if it was time. Then, but yeah, so I think they play on each other, the stereotype of the mother-in-law kind of being the antagonist of any marriage, but also the fact that she's a witch. So they kind of play off of each other. And I think really well, because that is also another metaphor.
Well, Endora stereotypes against mortals. This is what mortals
exactly.
You couldn't pick a better cast, though. Mm-hmm. You just couldn't, because they play off each other brilliantly. They just do.
And I heard they all really liked each other in real life. Even Erin Murphy talks so well about all of them, and Erin Murphy grew up with Agnes Moorehead, all that stuff. I won't go into too much detail about that because that's later on, but you can tell that they were all a tight-knit kind of family, and this was kind of the beginnings of that, and I think that's really cool.
I think what also is, I think this also now brings us to the nosy neighbor, the Kravitzes. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about this, Jesse?
There you go, Jess. Have at it.
I love the neighbors. It's so, I didn't realize how real to life this whole kind of nosy neighbor, gossipy little town is. But, growing up, not growing up, but being here in Oak Hill, it very much is like that. You have nosy neighbors. Small towns are always filled with nosy people.
Yeah,
especially
think of where me and Keith used to live. It's still that way. We don't even live there anymore.
Yeah, they'll come over on their lawnmowers, during times when you're sleeping, or when you're not expecting it. They'll ask questions, or pretend to bring a meal over. Meanwhile, they're really just trying to get information out of you, or be nosy or snoop through things the minute you leave the room, or just that's crazy real time stuff. I didn't grow up with that back home, but certain towns are actually like that. Yeah, it's here too. So I found it very, very fascinating. Since being here, I had a new perspective on these because I grew up with the show. But then after being here and actually seeing it play out, it's like, wow, that's like an actual thing. And I think that's just that gossipy kind of nosiness is just kind of inherent to certain people, I guess. I think everyone
how much of that. God, every time I think of Gladys, I can't help but think of Tom Hanks in the movie The Burbs. I don't know why.
I have to say that we have a nosy neighbor here, and basically she's at her window, doesn't matter what time of day, and she's always washing dishes. And you can walk by her door at like 2:00 in the morning.
My daughter has one of those in her place.
So weird.
Saying that, if anyone gets burgled or anything like that, about it, and she knows, and she's probably the reason why that person gets caught in her neighborhood. It kind of keeps the neighborhood safe at the same time, though.
How many dishes can this woman wash?
I have no idea. But I tell you what, though, she, if you want to know what's going on, she knows what's going on, and she also knows if anyone strange is going on in your neighborhood as well. So it does have a little.
Well, it does have its benefits, I imagine.
Precisely.
Yeah. But God, when you know that you got like neighbors, I remember, we were laughing about it before because where we lived before this town we lived in, everybody was watching everybody. And it was like the Burbs because most people were outside watching the neighborhood and all the buffoonery that was going on. Oh, look at this guy's drunk, or what's going on over here. The police are over here. And it was like life in a residential area. And you always have one. Me and my best friend used to live, next door to. We were helping her fix up a house. And we had this woman lived a house down. We actually called her Gladys Kravitz. That's how bad. We still call her Gladys.
It's become a term, I think, like quite literally, like this show has created that that terminology that people still probably use to this day. Oh, it's a Gladys Kravitz. She's the nosy neighbor. She has her little, what do you call those glasses, those eyeglasses that they use to, zoom in on people. Binoculars.
Binoculars, yeah.
Using those to look out into other people's windows. It's like, well, who even leaves their windows open all the time? Like, I was watching another show where
back in the day,
the windows open.
Back in the day, you could. I know we did. We left our windows and our doors unlocked, and then
yeah, exactly.
Can't do that no more.
Well, that's because you had the neighborhood witch looking out for everything, so they would know. What are you doing there? What are you doing in that person's yard?
Some Italian grandma.
I think what's also interesting about this episode as well is that you got the newlyweds playing against a couple that's been married for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the Kravitzes who've been married a long time and the relationship that they have with each other, and then you have these newlyweds, Samantha and Darren, and how they react to each other. That's quite it's nice watching this kind of different effect between these two couples.
It kind of doesn't give you much hope, though. You see this romantic, handsome, beautiful couple, and then you see what happens after several anniversaries.
Yeah.
The indifference,
But the thing is that the thing is, though, I think that, if you've been in a relationship for a long period of time, that the person that you fall in love with does become someone else, sort of thing.
True.
And the thing is and then you just take it for granted. And every single idiosyncrasy that for some reason was always there, but when you're in love and you're full in love and
it doesn't bother you.
You don't see it. And after over a period of time that you notice it, and then you just kind of just poke fun at it. And that's what Abner does with Gladys. It's like, I think one of the best lines in here is when Gladys goes, oh, she's got a strange disease, I'm gonna wake up with something strange. He goes, oh, Gladys, I've been doing that for the last 20 years. What
do you want, Gladys? I'm retired.
Abner is just, he's retired, and Gladys is basically, now that he's retired, I mean, you got the thing that you have with Gladys. Well, another problem that you have with that is which is quite interesting, is that when the husband becomes retired and he's at home all the time, he's under the foot of the wife all the time, 24/7. Right. And so you have that. So he's he's looking at this woman like, oh my God, it's like, I've been going to work and now I'm stuck in the house with you. And she's like, I am stuck in the house with you. I got nothing to do. I either can clean up around you or I can spy at the neighbors. And Gladys looks at the neighborhood, sort of thing.
I mean, I don't think she cleans the house. Like, who actually does that? Because she's always peering out that window. It's like, when does the house? I don't think I've ever seen her clean house.
But then again, how dirty does the house get when there's only the two of you all the time?
You'd be surprised.
Well, I could see him clean house, like maybe when they're not paying attention to the camera and she's peering out the window. That would be kind of interesting to see, like, him take on that role instead of her. Because her job is, being the nosy neighbor.
But what I also liked about this episode is that when Gladys talking to Abner about the house, it's like, oh my God, there's some people looking at the house, and she goes, remember, Abner, we watched it get built. We watched it start from the beginning. So they were the first people to live in the neighborhood, and they watched this house being built. So I guess there would be that extra interest. But I thought that was quite a nice little touch, actually, to add to it, sort of thing.
So they've been a fixated part of that neighborhood for quite some time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then again, I guess you have, different, and I also see that you have different interests between a husband and wife as well. I mean, he's interested in reading his paper, playing his little round of golf in the living room. And then you got Gladys, and they got Gladys, who basically it's just the town busybody.
What is a 5-letter word for peace and tranquility?
Yeah.
Death.
Yeah.
I love that. It's so funny.
And I have to sit there and say, I think that's what, this is part of the magic of Bewitched, is that simple fact is that, Gladys Kravitz could be annoying. It would have been very easy to make her very annoying, but you find her endearing and funny. But you also
feel
never
bad
annoyed
for her too.
You do feel bad for her because that she's seeing things as the watching the show, and nobody believes her, and everybody thinks she's mentally unstable. So she's like, please.
It would have been very, very easy to make her annoying, though. It would have been
True.
I think under any other, if you watch this if it was another show written by different people writing it or another actress playing it, she would be the most annoying thing. Like in Desperate Housewives, when you had like that nosy neighbor that's always was there in Desperate Housewives, like
Right.
and she was annoying. She wasn't endearing at all. She was annoying. Or and every other show I've ever seen when you have a nosy neighbor like that are always annoying. But this nosy neighbor is endearing.
It's annoying in a kind of cutesy kind of a way. You don't mind. You kind of understand what her role is, but it plays a role. And I think what's amazing about Bewitched and so fascinating is it takes us a very, very normal, situation at the time with the nuclear family and marriage and the kind of idealism that people had then about regular family life, but then puts its own unique spin on it to make it something very normal, maybe even mundane to some people, and turns it into something very fascinating and magical. And like, what would happen if you put this into the mix? And it's very fascinating just to see something like that play off. And I think a lot of people are fascinated by the idea of the nuclear family because you see that in so many different products, even today. Like Fallout video games have the idea of the nuclear family, and all these different kinds of things. Still,
because it was a beneficial part of American life, and
exactly.
I think that it's nice to revisit this stuff because it was the way America used to be.
Yeah.
The value of the family and to throw the comedy in there, it was just enough to make it successful.
And the value of being part of a community.
That too.
Well. Yeah, that
exactly.
too. And that's what I think what was so amazing about it. And that's why I think it's still something people gravitate towards to today, because I think people still want that. They want aspects of that, because I don't think people like like we still have neighbors that we've never even talked to. It's not at all. But I think people want to be part of the community. They want to be part of a working marriage and family and have a role to play in life and society. I think that's just something everybody aspires to in some form. Like they want that role, whatever it is. And I think shows like this kind of give them that a little bit. There's something very, very unique about Bewitched, and you wouldn't think about that at first glance, but after watching it and thinking about why people like this so much, like why it's more popular than shows like The Munsters or The Addams Family or even I Dream of Jeannie. Like it's more successful.
Who still were nuclear families, and it was still back in the day.
Exactly, and it was the same. It was a similar concept, but there's something very specific that Bewitched managed to do, and I can't even put my thumb on exactly what that is, but they managed to do something more specific.
Each character brings something to it, and you can't. Yep. And once you're introduced to said character, you can't imagine them not popping in and out. Literally,
it's true.
Yeah.
And that brings us to episode 3, It Shouldn't Happen to a Dog.
One of my favorite episodes.
When Darren's alcoholic and lecherous client, Rex Barker, played by Jack Warden, makes a pass at Samantha, she decides to teach him a lesson by turning him into a dog. The dog runs away, but Samantha eventually gets him back. When Rex makes another pass at her, Darren knocks him cold. Rex does wind up giving Darren his account. And this is the first episode that we're introduced to Larry Tate, played by David
Talk
White.
about suck up.
Right?
Larry the suck up Tate. I love how he always goes back and forth. He goes, it's not a good idea. Well, I think it's of course it's a great idea. He has such a brown nose. I love Larry though.
I know, you have to be that way in a business, I think. Sadly, in corporate, you kind of have to
I know, but he's not even trying to hide it though.
That's true.
He's not even good at it.
No, some of the people he sucked up to have pointed it out to him, I'm pretty sure.
But what was his name, the character? I forget.
Rex
the
Barker?
lecherous, the dog, the guy.
Rex
Barker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Played by Jack Warden, which is, he's a pretty known actor.
Well-known actor. But his last name his character was Barker. That's what was kind of funny. I wonder if, she turned him into a poodle. And he was being a lech. And, you kind of almost wanted to see Darren get his in this episode because he was kind of poo-pooing it. And this guy was really coming on strong to his wife, and he was real loaded,
They used to
believe
all women.
And this is where you kind of see where this, I don't know, how much you seeing this from the novel we just covered. I mean, it is
Passionate
keeping the
Bride,
alcohol and the kind of the zaniness of the book and then
the lechiness of men when it comes to a beautiful woman sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought what's quite interesting that I found Darren's character quite interesting because in some ways you're like, oh my God, you're not taking the voice of your wife. But then you have to remember that this guy, he doesn't have £1,000 account. It's a multi-million-dollar account. Now think about multi-million-dollar account in 1964. That's a lot of money. I mean, that's like
back then, yeah.
That's like landing the Apple computers at that time, sort of thing.
You're right.
And I thought, oh, okay, but then you do kind of wonder why. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those kind of episodes that I do like on as far as watching it and just kind of watching it and let it pass through you and just you watch it. But if you start looking at it a little bit deeper, you're thinking, ooh, Darren, he's coming on to your wife. And then when he finally does realize it's only because he sees it with his own eyes.
Yeah.
But you also think to yourself, is like, why aren't you taking your wife's word for this? What would your wife have to gain to make this story up?
Yeah, it's almost like he didn't take her seriously and doesn't take her seriously as a whole. Like, why wouldn't you care, like, in that moment when she's trying to explain that to you and even refusing to listen to her, but then even when she goes through with explaining to you what happened, you just don't take her seriously. And I actually like that Samantha, like, held her ground with him and, like, was like, nope, you're not sleeping in here. You're going downstairs and, finding... Yeah.
Couch in it.
I love the episode. This episode is really amazing because...
Isn't it like their first quarrel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I feel like Bewitched is kind of like a play-by-play, like a step-by-step, like about marriage just in general. Okay, like young love, that's the pilot. Then they get married and then they get their own house, interact with the neighbors. I mean, it's cool how it kind of... It's almost like a dollhouse, like how if you were playing with dolls and kind of were envisioning this whole setup on how married couples would act. It's almost like a setup play out of like a marriage and going and moving and having new neighbors and how that's going to play out. Then you have the occasional appearance of the mother and maybe she, I don't know, tries to... I don't know, whatever. And then you have the business aspect being more of an aspect. And because that's how, Darren supports the family. That's how they have their house, set up and all that. I can't even think and use words right now.
He's such a lech, though. You find yourself, I mean, if I had that kind of power, I would have turned him into something much worse than a poodle.
She was very tame considering, what she could have done
to
him.
It was funny. He has to get a tetanus shot as a dog. And then, they do his hair and then he keeps touching his hair.
That was so funny.
My chest hair is all rolled.
All ruffles, yeah.
What I think another thing was clever is that okay, you got like this lecherous guy
and he's a
drunk and he's like, okay, I'm all man, I'm all this, I'm God's gift to the human race and everybody
pretty much
to me, baby.
Yeah. And I'm a man's man. But then when he gets turned into a dog, who beats up on the dog?
The cat.
The cat. The cat.
No, not just a cat. It's the mountain lion of cats.
Yeah. And then when you see the mountain lion of cats, it's like a common everyday house cat. It's not even a really big cat.
He's got all those scratches on his face.
Well, he thought Samantha did that to him and was like, "Ooh, you little spitfire!" It's like, what is wrong with you?
I think this is also the first time that we realize that that because this will be a common theme of turning people into things, but we also realize is that apparently when they get turned into, in this case, when he gets turned into a dog, he has no memory of being a dog.
Yeah, no recollection of it. It's very interesting.
He just thinks he was hammered again. Literally, this guy gets hammered
Not only that, but he doesn't have memory of his previous, like when he was turned back into a human. He doesn't even remember that in his interaction with Samantha because you'd think he would blame Samantha or like think about it for a minute and then make accusations or something, but he didn't even.
Strangely enough, this episode kind of ties into Dark Shadows this month as well.
It does.
Well, we got one of them. We got one character that gets turned into a cat, don't we?
True.
That's right. That's right. I totally forgot about that.
But that's kind of funny that we have a bit of a tie in here. But
yeah, that's true.
And I also think that, this is what's quite interesting about these episodes, which that were, as to reflect from what Jesse was saying, is that now, we're now getting introduced into what Darren does for a living, and we're getting a bit more understanding
of Darren's
well.
world.
Yeah.
Darren's world, and it doesn't seem, and we know that Darren's got his own office, but we're never quite sure exactly where he is on the corporate
Kind of like a junior partner, wouldn't you say?
Well,
His
name's not on the door, so he might be an account executive.
You do get the impression he's trying to climb up the ladder and trying to become more independent and successful or something, because I don't know. I've always gotten the sense of urgency, like he's trying to get ahead even more than he already is. And that's why there's this urgency to sign with a client and get this new, thing up and running.
And he does say in the previous episode with Samantha that we're going to have to tighten our belts in order to afford
to
this
buy
house.
the house.
Exactly. So you do get, there's like a kind of restriction and a sense of urgency to okay, let's get this going. Let's do this. Because, he is now in a relationship. So there's more at stake. They have a house together, and he wants to be able to be the husband to provide for his wife, because, even though if he wanted to use Samantha to get everything that he wanted, he could, but he's doing this because he feels it's his role, his duty to do this. And essentially, if you didn't do that as a man, you're kind of a failure in not only your marriage, but in society. I think that's why this was such an important thing. If you think about the connotations to, nuclear family and what families were like during the time and what the priorities were, I think that's why it's such a big deal for Darren.
Also
and
kind of introduces us to Darren's fits, because he really starts losing his shit, and you know how he gets upset. Dick York really, as opposed to Dick Sargent, and I know that's later, but I like Dick York's fits a whole lot more because he gets more upset, and it's more funny when he's thrown into a witchcraft situation.
Well, another thing is, I think that Dick York's face is so readable. He can change his face and he can read his expressions. But he's also, whenever, we don't see it too much, in these episodes, but we'll see it later. But he's a lot more physical as well, right? With his actions.
Yeah, he's a very physical, very expressive actor, and not a lot of people know how to do that, but he does it really well.
And throughout the problems, though, they still love each other. It's a recurring general theme that will not go away no matter what happens. He's still going to end up loving Samantha.
And I don't think anyone can do dumbfounded as much as Darren can do it and still make
I know. He just is like, you turned him into a dog.
And Darren is one of those kind of weird people that you look at him and you kind of develop a weird kind of crush on him in a weird way.
In a strange way. I think it's more like you feel sorry for him, this poor slob.
Well, you kind of feel sorry for him. I'm not saying that he feels sexy. He's not one of these people that you want to see out of his clothes, but there's something about him that you kind of want to. He's not one of those actors, but he's kind of this person that you kind of just want to give him a hug and it's like, oh, don't worry, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You'll be fine, sort of thing.
I mean, personally, I always feel for Samantha's character in situations like this because I don't know. There's something I like about Elizabeth Montgomery, and I can't imagine anybody even coming close to playing Samantha's character. And in the first few seasons, I don't know, there's something very specific about her in these situations. And in this episode, I love that she was able to politely stand her ground with Mr. Barker and then her husband. And she knows how to handle herself, and she's very polite about it.
She's
and then
very
he goes after her again when he wants to drink some of the hair of the dog that bit him the night before, and he still does the same thing over and hits on her yet again. And then Darren walks in, and finally, Darren doesn't realize, well, this was getting pretty physical, and so he lets him have it. And whereas he still gets the account because. Apparently, a lot of this guy's best friends punch him in the face because he's done this before. So he's a career skirt chaser.
Yeah.
And I think another
his
thing
poor wife, but no one ever thinks of his wife. She goes, this isn't the first time that he's left me alone to drive home by myself.
That's true.
And I mean, think about that one character. What is her life like with this douchebag? It's like, what's going on?
I think another thing that we finally learn about Samantha that we see that brings us to the fore in this episode is how strong she is. She is a strong female character. Mm-hmm. And as you were saying that, you know, she doesn't play fools lightly, but at the same time, she doesn't play things against each other to get her own way either. She's fair.
Yeah. She's honest.
Yeah, and there's a morality about Samantha
Yes.
that you wouldn't see. I mean, there would be very, very easier to manipulate the situation, but she doesn't manipulate it. She only manipulates it to teach him a lesson. It's not to teach Darren a lesson. It's to teach this guy a lesson. For like, you can't get away with doing this.
Well, and I think this episode kind of brings up an interesting thing because, you know, when Darren and Samantha fail to see eye to eye, you know, Samantha has magical abilities and a totally different perspective than he does because of those abilities that she has. And Darren doesn't understand because he sees things from a very mortal, normal standpoint. And maybe Samantha sees that a lesson can be learned from this, but doesn't know how to kind of explain those kinds of things to Darren. And so they fail to see eye to eye on the situation. So because Samantha really sees that what she did is kind of more reasonable because of his actions, but then Darren fails to see that it's reasonable at all. And it's like, you don't turn, you as a powerful being, don't turn a human and exert your, you know, complete and total power over a mortal human that has zero power. So they're both kind of right in a way when you think about it, because when you think about it from Samantha's perspective, she did something very reasonable and very tame. But when you think about it from Darren's perspective, she did kind of cross a line by exerting her magical powers over someone who has no magical power. So it kind of was an unfair fight in that situation. But at the same time, Samantha didn't do something extreme. It was very tame because she just turned him into a puppy dog.
Well, the dog was a perfect dog, a ginger color.
Oh, I know.
And then every time Darren tried to get next to it, it would start growling at Darren, you know? It's like,
oh, no.
Well,
that wasn't a CGI dog either.
And when he gets turned back to a human, I think the makeup job done on Jack Warden was
I know.
Well, the hair, the eyebrows.
It reminded me of the Cowardly Lion. It totally reminds me of the Cowardly Lion with the ribbon, the eyebrows.
$27 was the bill for a full grooming and a tetanus shot. Those were the days. Oh my God.
Also a little fun fact for Bewitched. I heard, you know how Dark Shadows has Orbox. They provide the clothing for the characters. I heard that, I don't know if it was the whole show through or just the first season, but they had to provide their own wardrobe for the show, which they did get professionally dry cleaned and, ironed and stuff like that to look as nice as possible for the show. But I heard that they actually had to bring their own wardrobe to the set. I heard that. I don't know if it's true because where did Endora get her costume then?
So I'm hoping that Agnes Moorehead had a costume. I
didn't have that in her closet somewhere.
Now, I mean, before we move on to the next episode, I think what's quite interesting is that these actually aired in black and white.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting, and I think that these next two seasons that we'll be covering, which we'll be covering into our season 4 here, we'll get into season 2, but they're all in black and white, and it's quite interesting to look at the color palette, because when they start filming in color, we're going to see a out-of-this-world color palette that starts happening with Bewitched sort of thing. But
True.
I think it's quite interesting to look at the color palette from 1964 about the colors of the clothing and especially now that I think I'm watching the colorized versions. I'm not sure about. Are you both watching colorized versions?
Yeah.
Season 1.
I do. I can get the ones in black and white though, but they were black and white in the beginning. They were.
Yeah. For the first 2 years, they were black and white. Now it's really hard to find the black and white. My DVD.
That's true.
There are a few on YouTube, but it's sort of like Dark Shadows, same time. This started 2 years prior, so it would be black and white.
3 years.
But
2 years
3 years,
prior,
64. Dark Shadows started 66, 67.
66. Because at the end of Dark Shadows, when Dark Shadows goes, stay tuned tonight for Bewitched. You get that.
Yeah.
A witch marries a mortal.
I very rarely, I vaguely remember that when they'd announced the shows after, stay tuned for, because we're that old, Jess. But it's
they're on the original on Amazon Prime or Dark Shadows. They have the original until Barnabas comes on, and then they stop. That out.
That's true.
Because Barnabas onwards was syndicated. The earlier episodes weren't syndicated.
That's right. That's right.
So that brings us to episode 4. Mother meets what's his name. Samantha has lunch with a few of her nosy neighbors, using magic to assist with the meal. Endora refers to Darren as what's his name, and that night at their first meeting, Darren tells Endora that they can get along without witchcraft. They have a heated exchange before Endora leaves.
She does call him Dennis.
So, Vix, what's your thoughts of Mother meets what's his name?
I thought it was hysterical because you knew the confrontation was going to happen. It had to happen. And, you know, he was expecting some googly-eyed, scary-looking, ugly monster. But did you see the look on his face when he opened the door and seeing what almost like she walked out of a movie set? They had her looking beautiful in her dress and regalia. And he's kind of like looking at her like, holy shit.
I love that she dressed in black, though. I mean, I don't know if she did in real life, but in the colored version, they make her dress in black, which I thought was kind of funny, because if she can't come looking you know what, it would have been even funnier if she actually came looking like Margaret Hamilton's witch or something. Just the stereotype that Darren's expecting. But I don't think she really wanted to create that much of a fight. I think she kind of wanted him to draw himself out, and that's why she came looking the way that she did, because through the course of conversation that they had forward, she kind of wanted to give him a chance, but she was just annoyed. You could tell she was annoyed, was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time wanted him to kind of exploit himself and say something prejudiced so she could bite on him and, get on his case about that. You could tell that she was being manipulative because there was something, she had information because of Samantha's conversations and her being in the room, when Darren wasn't paying attention. She would, make herself scarce in the background, but then also be watching like the Cheshire Cat. And then I forget exactly what she says, but she already knew this. And she asks Darren something, and then he answers it because she wants, I think, him to answer for himself, to kind of exploit himself and what he actually thinks about Samantha being a witch and what he thinks about witches in general. Because I think she wanted...
But speaking of Endora, though, prior to that, you had the nosy welcome wagon women come in. And Endora retires to the upstairs, and the little boys
scene.
Come in. And she's going, little boy. Little boy.
So creepy. Hansel and Gretel moment.
I have to say, I love the way that this episode opens up, because basically you got Samantha making a cake the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And then you got Endora going, okay.
It was revolting.
And we can do this. We can have a gazebo. We can have a trellis and sort of thing. And then Samantha's like, no, I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. And she goes, oh, fine. Poof, off it goes, sort of thing. And I love that. Endora is interested in how Samantha is living mortal life. So she's just sitting there, and you can tell that. And I love the magazine, Hard Piece Bazaar.
Yeah,
I know. And so the audience loved it too because there was laughs.
And I have to say that you get the mother, and she's interested in like, how is my daughter faring in this new life that she's got? So she's there, and she's sort of thing. And she's also teasing her, like, are you sure it's kind of like, are you sure you're not missing this? Yeah. And then we get the nosy neighbor arriving, and basically it's Gladys going all over the place, and sort of thing, and like Gladys being Gladys, but she goes, oh, and you get Endora's
Gladys,
like, it's like I don't have, but Endora's like, I said, I don't have to go through this, do I? Can I just disappear? Sort of thing.
Poor Gladys, though, in this episode, you see how much these women value her very existence, because they want to organize a protest to keep the highway out, and they want her to sit in front of the cement mixer. You
didn't even ask me.
Nobody asked me. But it's a very telling episode, though, the whole thing.
Well, it's very telling because you also get the neighbors sort of thing, like nosing around and the jives.
And looking underneath the
like
price
that.
tags. And I hate bitches like that because they exist. They really still do exist.
Oh,
People
they went to Sheila levels with her. I mean, they're just nasty. Like, who does? Like, they weren't even subtle about it. Like, they did it right in front of her.
And
like,
their little brats come in and start picking up everything. That right there would have been a deal breaker immediately.
Again, Samantha holds herself very well and very politely. I kind of wish she would have been a little bit, firmer with the kids or whatever. I would have been, I don't know, but I'm not a woman. Maybe a woman handles those situations differently. I don't know.
But then again, but Samantha does play up on it. I mean, the thing is like, like cups. So she brings out like the best bone china. She zaps that in. She goes, "Oh no, these are the everyday
True.
ones."
Yeah,
True.
I know.
Yeah.
We haven't broke out. We haven't unpacked the good stuff yet.
Yeah. So Samantha is doing a little bit tit for tat there.
Yeah.
Good, because I was like
so
glad when she did that. And then she gets this pristine silverware and this expensive linen napkins that she pulls just right out of thin air. Then it goes, that the sound effects they have with this, like the sound of a big camera light going off.
But the thing was, that's what I quite like about this, because it's all so subtly done though.
I know. I like that too. And I love when magic is done subtle and not with like glorified Thanos technology. Like, I don't really want to see that. The subtlety is amazing. And if you think about how witchcraft would really go down in real life, you wouldn't actually see anything like that take place. It would be very subtle, more along the lines of Bewitched, not that anyone's that powerful. If you're an actual witch or consider yourself to be one. But I do like the subtlety of it. Yeah. I love the subtlety about it, and that's what makes it so magical, is that despite the limited budget, they made you believe that she was capable of that. Despite,
They did a good job, though, actually.
They did an amazing job.
Things appear and disappear. Back then, that was pretty cool. And actually,
still is.
I still try to see for a different exchange in the facial, whatever, but they're pretty spot on with changing it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to note that episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all filmed on the same day.
Really? I wonder why that
Yes.
was. I did not see that factoid.
Yeah, they filmed all these 5 episodes. The pilot was filmed separately. Then the next 5 episodes, which we're covering the first 3, but and the 2 after this for next month, they're all filmed on the same day. So they punched these episodes out very quickly.
Wow.
And the thing is, and you got to remember that because what we get when Samantha goes, "Oh, do you want to meet Darren?" And Endora says, "Yes." And how should I present myself? And then she, of course, goes through her different characters, and which are fantastic. But you have to remember that they were like that, and there's someone that's there. They had to stand there, and they had a special broom that they put. So basically, if your arm was up in the air, they would put the broom underneath there. And then if they removed the furniture, they had to remove all the furniture while you stood there with your arm up and kept it in pose. And then keep your face that pose while they're moving everything out of the way. And that must have been difficult. Especially like with the mortgage, when they're buying the house and they're zapping the furniture in and out. That means that those 2 actors are just sitting there, just standing there in that pose, waiting for them to bring all this furniture in and take all the furniture out.
I know. Isn't that amazing? The work went into it. You really got to appreciate it, because they didn't have the technical, whatever, the CGI back then.
And think about it. And they did 5 episodes in one day.
So that I wonder how long that took. Did you see how long it took? Because I didn't.
I just read that they did the episodes 2 to 6. They filmed those all on the same day.
I'm going to have to go in there and look to see how long the most critical episode was, to see how long that took, because they must have had a kind of a big set, actually, when you think about it, because
it also means that they had one hell of actors that basically just hit their spots, filmed it, off they went, sort of thing. They had to there's I doubt that they had many times for different takes and stuff like this, so they wouldn't
have to dig up the bloopers too, because I bet you some of those are priceless.
And William Asher and Samantha were married. Elizabeth Montgomery were married.
Yeah.
And he was the director. And the thing is that they made sure that they were home at 5 o'clock every day. They started work at 7 and finished work at 5.
Wow, that's unheard of now, is it not?
And now put that, we did 5 episodes in one day. They filmed 5 episodes in one day. So
wow.
About this episode, I also have to say that when we get the neighbors coming in and with the kids and stuff like this, I thought it was very interesting, though you don't get a story about these people, but the way that the actresses that they used and the way the kids, you can tell that there are mothers who are on the brink of madness sort of thing.
Yeah.
That they're doing the mother thing where they got these boys that are running around sort of thing. They're trying to control that, but meanwhile they're trying to keep the community going because that's what's expected of them as well. So they're trying to balance. They're doing this balancing act. And then I guess when they do show up, and then of course they give Samantha a bit of grief a little bit. Yeah. But I thought, thinking back on it, looking at it, this episode when I watch it again, it's like you can kind of understand it a little bit because it's like here this pretty young wife just starting on this marriage journey, and here you got these people who now have kids, and basically like the honeymoon is over, and they would be a bit jealous of Samantha. This is what they were before the children and everything came along, which is quite interesting. And I love that. That's what I have to say about Bewitched. Even with the small, minute characters, whether they're just in for a scene or two and then gone, they're so good. The characters are so good.
There's nothing generic about it. Like they didn't waste a moment. Like typically, I feel like in most shows today, they wouldn't feel like they would need to do a lot of work, but the few moments that they have, they put a lot into it. Like you can actually kind of get a sense of them as if you're reading a real life person with this real life experience. Like, oh yeah, this woman is. You can kind of get a sense of their story and their background just from the few moments on screen because they're that good at conveying their character somehow. I mean, it is kind of crazy, and this is why I love older television because because there wasn't all this glorified special effects. It was solely relied on acting. And I think the acting, there's something about it that's just so different and so much better than a lot of TV, especially today. I don't think a lot of TV acting today is necessarily always that great, especially if it's like on the CW or, a network like that. HBO is typically better, but I don't know. I think Bewitched is another exception. Dark Shadows is another exception of like excellent acting, despite
things were different back then.
Not being the same.
You almost had to be spot on back then, though, didn't you? Especially for a serial or something like that. And I think a little more kind of personal went into it, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I think that it wasn't just your by-blow actors. They really loved their, pardon the pun, craft, and what they did. And they were a family.
Well, we are in the We're in the heyday of character actors as well. Where you it's
not like that anymore. I think it kind of started disappearing in the 80s, with soap and things like that.
Oh.
Well, people will need to become movie stars or have, everyone has to be beautiful sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah, then you didn't have your typical little bit of everybody. Everybody, you have to be really, you have to be beautiful now or you're just, no one wants to look at you.
And I have to admit that probably all these character actors probably all were part of the studio system at one point or another.
Oh, yeah.
They all did films. They would be in the background of the film or, have a small part in this, that, and everything else. And like you look at some of these, people that, especially, when we get more and more of these character actors coming through and you start reading their CVs, it's like they were everything. They were doing everything. They were doing movies. They were doing TV shows. They were doing, and it's like you kind of think of like these people were working all the time sort of thing. So. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to what Jesse said about when Darren meets Endora.
Right.
How did you feel about the exchange between Endora and Darren?
Well, you knew it was going to go south really quick. I mean, at first you kind of thought, well, I guess on first seeing it, years ago, you kind of had that little glimmer of hope that it was going to be a civilized exchange, but that goes south so quick.
I know I like how the moment plays out because you can tell by everyone's reactions, Darren's expression, Samantha's expression, and then Endora's complete stoic coldness when she first arrives. You don't know if she's going to be warm. You don't know, until she starts speaking, and she's acting very glamorous, very stoic. And just kind of enters the room. Is like, oh, can you fix me a Spanish vermouth or whatever? And
martini,
never mind,
very
I'll fix
dry
it.
with Spanish olives.
And then she's basically saying, Darren, you're incompetent. And it screams volumes, and I think that eats away at him, but he's trying to maintain.
I think it's so
fascinating.
I think she's mad at him because why isn't my daughter good enough the way she is, way she was born? Why did she have to change?
That's how I took it as well. I found it's kind of funny because when I watched it, I was kind of like, I think Endora shows up there, and I think Endora's testing the waters a little bit. Mm-hmm. But then I think to myself, like, Darren, this is your mother-in-law. This is kind of your family. And why are you pushing your point so strong? It's like if Dora wants to come and like do her magic sort of thing. Because to be honest, it's just the three of them. Now, if something happens and let's say Larry Tate was there or Gladys was there and Dora's doing all this, I can understand having that pushback.
Yeah, but Endora doesn't even strike me as someone that would use her powers in a situation like that. I think she was doing it on purpose to prove a point. Because I think
she say she was going to turn him into an artichoke.
Yeah. That was the point when you were reminded that it was a sitcom, because at first, like during that whole scene, you do kind of feel intense, like you're watching like an actual drama. Intense. It did. And I've like when she said artichoke, like it brought me back to the fact that, oh yeah, this is supposed to be funny. It's a comedy. But during that whole exchange, it got really serious and heavy there for a minute. And I loved that whole scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, I think.
Meanwhile, Mrs. Kravitz is watching from her bedroom window.
Oh, that's right. That's right. There's so much going on.
I have something to say that I do think that for me, I love this episode, but I think that for me, watching it again, and it's kind of weird because, it's kind of weird when you're watching things to discuss for our show because you kind of see things slightly different than what I normally would watch these. Normally I would just watch it, just enjoy it, but then I tend to look at things a bit differently. And for me, I thought that Darren overreacted.
I thought I did too.
Because I'm thinking to yourself, it's like, this is your mother-in-law. You're overreacting. First of all, this is part of your family. This is Samantha's family, and you need to treat her with a little bit of respect.
Exactly.
And to be honest, because she comes in, she's all demure, she's she's testing the water, okay, by whether it's having a cigarette or a piece of glass, and she's asking Darren serious questions that you would ask anyone that was married to your daughter.
But she's using magic though to be a little bit pushy though. The martini, the cigarette, and then she gets mad at Samantha for handing her the ashtray as opposed to levitating it over to her.
But then to go, it's like, and then like, well, why isn't my daughter good enough for you? Why, you love her, why isn't she good enough for you? And then Darren explodes because and then he explodes.
We can do it without any of you. We don't need anybody else.
And
I think Endora brought a valuable point.
But let's turn this around. Suppose we're going to get to it. We're going to get to an episode where Samantha's going to meet Darren's parents.
Yes.
Yay.
Suppose that Samantha did the same thing to Darren's parents. Would that be acceptable?
No.
Samantha treated Darren's parents the same way that Darren treated Samantha's mom.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be so why? That's why
it's a double standard, isn't it?
There is, yeah, because he's the man of the family.
He's the man of the story, but I do think that he could have been a bit more
respectful.
And
I wish he would have been too.
I think he could have got his point across because at the end of the day, this is your wife's mother. And
what do you think was going on with the writers? I mean, initially it's the writers that did this. So what do you think they were trying to portray?
Well, I have to sit there and say they did some, as Jesse was saying, they did some fantastic writing. They made a fantastic scene, and it was fantastically played out.
Right.
But if you look at it in like realistic terms now, if you want to look at it from a different point of view, because I quite when we had these discussions, I kind of like to turn the thingy here and just give it another point of view, sort of thing.
Exactly.
It doesn't necessarily mean I believe that because it kind of makes you open it up a little bit more. And I would sit there and say that if I was Darren in that instant, if I was married to Samantha and I wanted Samantha to be as suburban as possible and try not to use her powers, and if Samantha's not using her powers, but her mom comes and let's put it this way. Okay, let's say I hate lasagna and I make sure my wife doesn't cook lasagna. But if her mom's coming and her favorite food is lasagna, I will suffer through eating lasagna to make her mom happy because her mom's a guest in my home and it's my job to make them.
Exactly.
I have suffered through green bean casserole for lots of people, let me tell you.
Yeah. And so, and in this instance, that's why I think that Darren overreacted. I think that he could have, done things. I think he could have reacted a little bit differently. Like, listen, it's like, Samantha and I had, he could have said that Samantha had a discussion about this. Samantha's happy with that. And I go, if Samantha's happy with that, I think that you should be happy with that. And then Dora would have gone like, she wouldn't have said what she said and she wouldn't have stormed off, but it would given her food for thought to think, okay, well, my daughter's willing to do this because she wants to do this, not because Darren's telling her to do this. Or has Samantha come in and go, listen, Mom, it's like, don't worry. This is not Darren's decision. This is my decision.
Well, don't you think that he's kind of muscling her a little bit? Because when she told him, all he keeps talking about is normal. Well, what is normal? His normal or her normal?
Precisely. That's another thing as well, is what's normal.
Exactly.
You know, if I marry a Jewish person and they're celebrating Sabbath every Friday, that's not my normal.
Yeah.
But
I would deal with it.
But
what's normal to you?
But it would have to become my normal. Same thing as like, you know, going to a baptism is going to have to be their new normal. You know, so everything is compromise, isn't it? So.
Endora has the best line in this situation where she's like, what's normal to you is to us asinine. I love the way she says that. It's one of my favorite lines that she says.
She really does look down her nose at us mere mortals. She does.
Oh, yes. And you can kind of understand it a little bit.
But that's pretty much it, though, isn't it? What's normal to you is to me is asinine.
Baseball. When she was describing baseball,
that's right.
I'm like, yes, that
because
is exactly
those things that everybody
thinks
we eat.
A series of what? A series of nothing. Oh, isn't that just like a mortal running around for a series of nothing? I love that too, because I don't personally understand sports. I think sports are asinine because they get paid so much just to run around and chase balls on a field. That too, you know. And I think it's really dumb because there are actually people that risk their lives to use their in the military, they use their athleticism and their prowess to, you know, defend our country. And you have like football players acting like they're doing something noble when they're really just doing things to feed their own ego, to get their own glory. Like they're not doing anything for the American people. They're only inspiring people to like play football when they grow up. Like, I don't think it's that great, but I totally understood Endora's point. And I thought it was super funny watching her think about that and explain. And Samantha obviously didn't quite understand the concept of it, but it was pretty accurate. It was accurate enough in my mind.
Well, you know where you stand with Endora. She's not going to pull any punches, and this is going to set the mood for the next several years, you know.
Endora's my favorite.
Well, what else reminds me, with that point that you bring up, over here on Channel 4, we have two shows. We have Couples Come Dine With Me and Come Dine With Me. And they're showing on Netflix here. And basically what they do is they take Come Dine With Me, they take 5 strangers, and basically they go to each other's house for dinner. And basically they judge each other.
That sounds fun.
But it's a really good show because what you see is like different people and how they view like just food. It's like this is how we.
What is it like interculturalization? Like, you know, Hindu food is.
No, it could be. I mean, basically, it just could be. You know, you might have some intercultures. You might just have a common person having, one of the people could be, someone who's like, a middle-class business person. Another one could be just like a commoner. Another one could be Indian. Another one could be just an everyday kind of schmo, but you just get 5 different personality types, and they go in. It's like, and just the way that they view each other and the way they go into, because they go like when the person's cooking dinner, they're going through the person's drawers and stuff and looking at things and stuff like this. And the thing is, it's just what Jesse was saying about how Endora views this, but then we see how Darren views things, and it's quite weird that when you do watch Bewitched and you kind of look at some of these other things that that we have experiences, this is the way that everyone views everything. Everything is, stereotypes and understanding different cultures and kind of come to grips with what might be normal for you might be totally weird for me, and then trying to understand that. And then as you're trying to explain your normal, I'm kind of, most of the times I'm a bit like Endora going, what, really? sort of thing. I found that quite interesting.
Well, they're so busy trying to... Oh, sorry. I was going to say something. Anyway, I was going to say that they're so busy trying to prove their point that they never have the conversation of why they see things differently. Like, they never have that heart-to-heart conversation to really get somewhere. They're always so busy trying to say why they're right, that's their focus, but they only further cement each other in their positions, but they never compromise or come together. And that kind of is frustrating because you do want to see them compromise and like get along for once, like at least an episode.
Well, there is, but that's a long ways down the line, and that's just for a very brief
interlude.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to set this Story Geek. Story Geek is going to tell you what you can watch or what you can download during the COVID crisis. Everything that they talk about can actually be seen in streaming services or download. So take it away, Story Geek.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of September 7th? I'm Jay Shear, author of the Amazon top-selling time travel serial story, Timeslingers, and here are the movies available this week in theaters and new to streaming. In theaters in wide release, The Broken Hearts Gallery, which is about a woman who opens up a pop-up gallery full of items that her former lovers left with her. It's a romantic comedy, it's rated PG-13, and Metacritic gives it a 61. There's not much new available to rent, so we'll jump straight into streaming. Now available on Netflix. Not much new added on Netflix since we got so many new additions last week. Netflix did release the controversial film Cuties, which is about a girl who joins a dance troupe. And that is about the least controversial description you will hear on the interwebs. Metacritic gives the film a 68, while the audience score is a 1.1. And many are claiming they've canceled Netflix because of it. I have zero interest in it, so don't rely on me for an opinion. I did, however, rewatch Casino Royale, which came out on Netflix last week. The first part of that film is fantastic, but in my opinion, it's too long and gets a bit boring at the end. I also watched Ocean's 12, the internationally themed follow-up to Ocean's 11, and I'll be honest, I didn't love that film either. So if you haven't canceled Netflix, do yourself a favor and watch a great film like Glory or Back to the Future. Those will not let you down. Over on Amazon Prime, they've got a bunch of new content, but my recommendation for you, if you're into superhero stuff especially, is The Boys Season 2. The Boys is superhero satire in many ways, but it's done extremely well. It's definitely a scathing commentary on the U.S., and I find it very entertaining. Metacritic does as well. They have it at 81. Be warned, though, it is rated M for mature and very much deserves that rating. Over on Hulu, Hulu has added Prisoners, which I've been meaning to watch since 2013 when it came out. Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Viola Davis all star in it, and Denis Villeneuve directed. Metacritic has Prisoners at 70. If there's anybody listening who wants to self-publish a book, I just released an educational course titled Marketing 101 for Self-Published Authors. I wrote and self-published an Amazon top-selling novel and have over 20 years of experience in marketing. In other words, I paid for my marketing degree and my MBA, so you don't have to. Look for my course, Marketing 101 for Self-Published Authors, on Udemy. Or if you'd like more info on it, shoot me an email at hi at reclamationsociety.org. That's hi at reclamationsociety.org. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear from the Story Geeks Podcast.
Hello, welcome back to Literature Lessons Podcast, and we're discussing Bewitched, Seasons 1 to Episodes 1 through 4. And now we're at our Witcher Mortal. And this is where we discuss our favorite character and least favorite character from these 4 episodes. So, Jesse, who's your favorite character of these 4 blocks? And who's your least favorite character?
Oh, it's my favorite character is easily Endora. I love the way that she views things. Like when she talks about, what witches are, it's so poetic. I love that. And even though she can be a bit stingy sometimes, it does come from this like higher plane knowledge that nobody understands. And you can tell there's something very childish about Samantha because, she's in a young relationship, and as old as she is, there's something very naive compared to Endora,
Right.
She's still a baby, And
in their world, anyway.
Exactly. And so I think that's why she hangs around, because she really wants to make sure that if Samantha's going to do this thing, she's going to do it right, and with her by her side, and she's going to do her best to kind of chug along. So I think it does kind of speak volumes that despite Endora's stinginess, she is a very supportive mother and is doing the very best that she can with the knowledge that she possesses and her abilities and stuff, and being immortal. She's going to try to do her best to fit in this not so idealistic situation. So she's my favorite for that. I think sometimes people might misunderstand her, but that's my understanding of her, and that's why I like her. My least favorite, even though I love Dick York, Darren is not the best character sometimes. So he's probably my least favorite, just because he's, like you said earlier, he doesn't compromise, especially in situations where he would, it would be so much more smooth if he could just get along with her. Like, if I can understand, like, Samantha agreed, and it's her choice to even live the mortal life with her husband, but then to also try to force that onto Samantha's mother is a little overbearing, and he could have handled that much better. I think there are other situations he could handle much better, and he does have a tendency to overreact. So that makes him my least favorite character.
And what about you, Vix? Who's your favorite character?
I hate it when I'm asked for least favorite character, and I really don't have one. But I'd have to go with the little known parts sometimes intrigue me the most, like Abner. I have to say that he's like my favorite character because I already see where this is going, and I can't wait for more because he's such a wise ass, and he's got these one-liners, and he's such a condescending, irreverent husband who just wants to be retired, and he wants to stay that way. He doesn't want any drama in his life, and he's got this crazy wife that's seeing all this crazy shit going on next door, and her nose is out the window more than it is, like she's saying, I'm dreaming. She just disappeared into a puff of smoke. Kill me. Do whatever you want, And he's just like looking at her, like, what the hell? So this guy has to endure a lot already. His life has compounded so much more because these people moved across the street. So, I mean, as much as it's hard to say you dislike any character because I really love them all. And I would have to say that not so much Darren was the one that bothered me, but it was the welcome wagon women who I wanted to stick my foot clean up their butt for looking at price tags and just being really, nitpicky about going through people's things and looking and see if they have the proper china or they need a house decorator or whatever, someone to come in and making it seem like their home is less than theirs for whatever reason. And I guess that gets my goat because I've encountered people like this in my life. And, you just know they're out there and they have a purpose in the show. So we know that, they have to be there and we know why, because they make things happen. But I would have to say those guys, even though they have a part in the show.
Well, I guess if you're talking like other characters outside of like the main cast, I would say Sheila would be my least favorite character because she was a total...
Oh God, yeah, she did that role brilliantly. She didn't get enough credit for being, with getting the spinach caught in her tooth and everything a beautiful woman does not want to do at a dinner party, like put her elbow in the soup, her hair comes undone. She has a hairpiece on to top that off. So anything that possibly she could have got back at her for was done to her in 5 minutes.
Oh, I know. Less. She stripped her of her perfect image. I loved that.
Just strips her, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite character is, I have to go with Endora. I think in these first 4 episodes, we get so many sides of Endora that I quite like.
She's strong presence.
A strong presence. We get someone who's kind of bitchy and sarcastic, which I love anyway. I mean, I love sarcasm.
I wonder why.
I kind of adopted that from my own personality trait. But I also like that then we get like some scenes where you can tell that she so much loves her daughter, and you get these kind moments from her. And I think that anyone else in this kind of role would have made, this could have been such a 2-dimensional role that basically they come in, it's like, when sometimes you watch a sitcom and someone comes in, like neighbor comes, hello, and it's like, whether it's Carlton the doorman or whatever from any episode.
Carlton the doorman. This is
but you know what I mean?
Doorman.
Yeah, you know what I mean? They come in, they kind of, or one day at a time have that janitor that came in, Schneider.
Yeah,
they kind of come in, they do the little stick, and then they kind of go, and you're kind of going, and there's always something slightly annoying sometimes.
But lovable.
But lovable, but not a lot of depth. And that depth doesn't happen until like 2 or 3 seasons on. But here we got this one character here who's got so much depth, so much understanding, and just the looks on her face and the way that she plays every single scene. And I have to sit there. Agnes Moorehead and Dora. I mean, I just love her. Period. Episodes.
It's just not fair to pay attention to the other characters in my brain sometimes because she does suck all the oxygen out of the room. She's brilliant. She's fantastic. she's so glamorous, and
Oh, I know. She speaks volumes with a simple expression, and that's something I love about her.
And she's a scary broad, because being a mother, when somebody, is your child is in a relationship, and I've had this problem. I just don't have Endora's gifts. But when somebody kind of insinuates that your child is not good enough, or they need to change or whatever to accommodate the other person, it does kind of set you off just a little bit. And so you do develop a little bit of an attitude. You try to overcome it, of course.
Yeah.
Now, my least favorite character has to be in the pilot episode when Darren's having a drink at the bar and he's discussing to the guy next to him. And the thing is, it was kind of hard I think his lines fell flat. And the thing is, they're supposed to be like colleagues. They're supposed to be like friends or something, but it didn't really play well because it's like, oh, I'll see you later on. So obviously,
it wasn't Larry Tate, was he?
No, it was. Well, it wasn't Larry Tate, but you didn't know if they were friends or.
No, I know, but
yeah, or if he was just the guy at the bar.
He's just at a bar. But don't they say they're friends?
Yeah, they're friends, and they're gonna.
Maybe they're just bar friends. Maybe they're just bar friends.
Maybe they're bar
I'll see you at the bar
together.
later.
Yeah, but I'm so used to after watching these 4 episodes, even the welcome committee that came in, you could tell what their stories were, and they're so well drawn. And this kind of fell a bit flat. Even the bartender who had one line,
right?
Says, though you all see what I'm married to, had a lot of bumps than this guy, and this guy had 2 scenes.
Right.
So yeah, for me that was my least favorite character. I don't know, it just fell a bit flat for me. Which in any other episode, I probably wouldn't even remember him. But I am really struggling to find a least favorite character.
I'm struggling too. So yeah, that's why I didn't hit. That's a hard question when something's been done so well for 4 episodes. You got to pick up something you don't like, and it's hard because they did so well setting this up for the rest of. Because it was.
That's why I try to separate the actor from the character, because even though I love Dick York as Darren, I can't imagine anyone, being Darren as well as him. I do kind of have to, in these episodes, those were specific things that kind of bugged me a little bit, because I really just want there to be these good moments with Darren, and I kind of want to see more magical element.
If they do that, though, they get all warm and fuzzy.
I don't want them to completely, but just a little bit, just even a little bit extra.
Well, they do, and that's so far away, but it doesn't last long. That's what I'm saying. And this is the way it's supposed to be. But, he did start it when you think about it. All these episodes later, Darren was the one that started this shit. So,
True.
That brings us to the Bewitching Hour, and this is where we discuss favorite episode and why. So, Jesse, what was your favorite episode of this 4 and why?
I was originally going to say the pilot, just because, that's the start of everything, and it really kind of cements the whole story together for seasons to come. But I do think it might be the episode where this is hard too.
It is hard.
It's either the house one. No, I don't know. It's either the house one, the Rex Barker one, or when Darren meets Endora. It might be that one. It might be when he meets Endora. I don't know.
So
just because
Mother meets what's his name.
Yeah, just because.
Dennis.
I mean, I love the interactions, and I love that they're finally meeting, because then she doesn't have to be like the Cheshire Cat and kind of hanging around in the background, like she's on this invisible tree or something, or shelf or whatever. I love the interactions, and I thought it was a strong moment for Agnes Moorehead, because it was a much more serious side of her than we've seen so far. Because I don't know, there was something very mesmerizing about that scene, and it was really that scene that kind of made it my favorite.
Mother is watching.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's just so much to her character that I just love. Like her and
She's
Samantha.
Just an excellent actress.
I really love Samantha's character too, and she's one of my favorites just because I love how she handles situations, despite being a woman. Because when you look at a show like I Dream of Jeannie isn't portrayed as someone who's intelligent. She's portrayed as a very stereotypical dumb blonde character, which I thought was kind of sad, because Barbara Eden was probably a very intelligent woman. But Samantha is kind of a contrast. She's very intelligent, and she handles situations really well. She's very patient. She's very kind and compassionate. And even when she has to set her ground, she's always very fair with Darren, or, that her, his boss. Like, the only thing she did was turn him into a puppy dog. Like, for her.
Oh yeah, that just all goes for a day. Just turn him into a beige poodle, okay?
Right?
Just another day.
Exactly. But she handles herself really well, despite being, an immortal character. And, she could let that get to her head and use her power against her and, be like the really bad, stereotypical dominant female, with those powers. But she doesn't hold that against anybody or, anything like that. So she's another one of my favorite characters. And I want to say that she's my favorite, but Endora really is my favorite just because of that. And I love their interactions. Like, her and Samantha's interactions together are always my favorite, just because you do see that Endora cares so much about her. So, so I do think this last episode is my favorite just because of all of those things.
And what about yourself, Vix? What's your favorite episode of this block?
I'd have to. Well, I love them all. I hate it when we always have to pick.
I know.
Two.
It's
just
so hard
because there's each and every one stands out something special. But I'd have to say the last one, because it really does set and cement what is to come, I think. Mm-hmm. Because the line has been drawn, where everybody stands, and you see where this is all going to evolve into. Yes. And that's why I like this episode so much. It's like, okay, we now know that this is where this is going to go, and so it leaves so much, so much writing that they can do just because of this one episode. Because now the deal is sealed, right? Mm-hmm. And
it definitely has that. It almost has like this devil, like you just signed a contract with the devil kind of feel, and you also know.
Well, yeah, you know where Endora stands, and then you got poor Samantha. It's like, I love them both. Here I go, and then you got, you even got Mrs. Kravitz now seeing Endora blow up into a puff of smoke and leaving the house, and on top of that, Darren is pretty much stuck his foot in it. He could have been just a little bit more, respectful. Maybe, what's the word? Tolerant is the word, baby. I hate using that word these days.
I know.
Had some tolerance. Maybe try to understand her point of view. This is my daughter, for better or for worse. She married her. So maybe, there's nothing worse than coming between a mom and her babies. Seriously. Nobody wants to hear anybody say your child has to change to accommodate my mortal life. Kind of
he wasn't empathic enough. He was so, busy trying to be right that he wasn't being empathic enough.
I think he's too busy trying to sign a business deal that he's forgotten his humanity a little bit at this point. Yeah. And maybe he should have, instead of, barbing at his new mother-in-law, he should have been a little more considerate of his wife, who clearly loves them both and is now in this situation, which evolves into several more episodes, as we all know. But that's what I think about episode 4. That was my favorite one.
My favorite episode, it's a toss-up between episode 2, Be It So Ever So Mortgage, but I'm going to have to go over episode 4, Mother Meets What's-His-Name, because I think, I find very interesting that basically every single one of these episodes is a 3-act episode. And I think that the 3 acts for what Mother Meets What's-His-Name, you get such great 3 acts. You get you get basically Samantha talking about marriage and, getting a grasp of mortal life. You get how the mom's like, teasing her with magic all the time, whether it's getting the phone to work or whatever like this. And then you get
the phone.
but then you get kind of like the second act that basically comes through is that then you get the neighborhood coming into the home sort of thing. So this is what the community's like.
So much going on in this episode. There's just so much going on.
And you feel like it's real life because, Samantha always has her hands full, and she is beginning to get the hang of it. And it's kind of fun to see that.
You put yourself in it, because it is life, isn't it? Just a huge twist.
Yeah. Samantha's busy. She's busy going about her own thing, doing housework, talking to her mother. Oh, then all of a sudden there's a knock at the door. Neighbors are coming by. So her mother, doesn't want to handle them. So she goes upstairs or, into thin air, whatever. And then Samantha has to deal with them. And then she notices that, oh, now I have these people in my house and they're busy looking under my tables and trying to look for, prices and seeing how cheap everything is and all that fun
When you're
stuff.
saying 3X, are you talking like, elaborate on 3X just a little bit more?
3 times. 3X is 3 times.
No, I mean 3X. Like you're saying Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Acts.
No,
Act 1.
I was
No,
asking you to elaborate on that.
No. So what happens is these episodes are all done in 3 acts. So you have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3.
Right.
And so basically, something happens in Act 1, then then Act 2 comes in, and Act 3 comes in, and that kind of finishes it. And normally, what you have at acts is like going to a play. Plays are done in 3 acts, sort of thing. And for a 22 to 24 minute episode, it's very rare that you get 3 acts.
Right.
Friends is 2 acts, sort of thing. So it's very rare where you get these 3 acts. But here you get the 3 acts. So basically, Act 1 would be the mother having, the cake being made, Samantha coping with everyday mortal life. The mother basically, having discussion, talking about, would you like to meet Darren? Right. Oh, maybe, what about tonight? Well, maybe I'll give Darren a call, get in the phone sort of thing. That's Act 1. And then basically, then they go into the living room, and then Endora goes, how would Darren want to see me? Blah-de-da-de-da.
Oh, gotcha. Very good point. Good point.
Act 2 is basically, in comes the neighbor. So it's Samantha dealing with the neighborhood sort of thing, and then the runaround boys and how they're tied up, and Gladys finding out that the phone, and then the phone guy shows up, and when Gladys finds out, is like, why is the phone's working? The phone's not, the phone, and the guy's there to hook up the phone. So that's Act 2. Act 3 is Endora coming to meet Darren for the first time. So that's a 3 act. So it's a 3 act play. We also get the 3 acts. Also, is like to take the pilot episode. You get Act 1 is Darren and Samantha meeting each other, running into each other, everything like this. Act 2, and basically, Act 2 is like he finds out that he's sorting out how he's going to feel like by marrying a witch. What he's going to do about that. Act 3 is seeing the ex-girlfriend.
Got you.
3 acts, sort of thing.
Good point.
And I think, But I think that with Mother meets what's his name, I think the 3 acts work very, very well with each other, because it's like, you start out and Darren and the mother can meet, but then you have something else that's going on, and then you get that, but it also opens up the world sort of thing of Samantha. So and I said that these 3 acts probably work the best and the strongest for me, and everyone's very, very strong, whether it's the most one person, one character actor's giving one line, you pretty much got so much giving to you. And nothing I found is that when I rewatched this episode 2 or 3 times, and I had to sit there and say that no line is a throwaway line. Every line means something as well. So that's probably why.
Excellent.
Now, the midnight hour, which is basically we discuss our overall impression of these episodes. So, Vicky, overall, these 4 episodes, what are your total impressions of these first 4 episodes?
God, haven't you guys got my impression by now? You guys know me too well. But I love them all. Like I said, it was kind of hard to pick just one, because they're so endearing, all the characters and all the situations that, they're not like normal situations, but yet they are. But like I said, they have this twist. You got a witch involved. That makes and then you got relatives that are witches, and just nosy neighbors. It's got a little bit of everything that becomes so relative that I think anybody could, it becomes relevant in your life, because we all have these weird situations and interactions and relationships with people. And I like how they start from the first episode and how it evolves into finally meeting Mama. And I thought that the writing was excellent. I mean, I can't even think of what shows compare to it today. I mean, people say, oh, I watched Charmed or I watched this. Nothing against those shows, but they just don't have what this has. They don't have
that magic.
No, not that kind of magic anyway. I mean, and
yeah.
And it's so it's so easy to resonate with the viewer even today. Because it is just regular, basic human nature, all of it, the anger or the happiness and the situations that go on or that, preclude or come after, each, when they butt heads about certain things. But I think that the evolution of this is set up really well. And, it's going to go into the rest of the seasons, and it's got a hugely solid foundation to carry on. And that's why it became so successful.
Mm-hmm. What about yourself, Jess?
I do think these episodes were definitely very strong for the series. They really set up the overall show, and that's why I loved the first season more than I think any of the other ones, because
they're so new, unlike anything I've done before.
Yeah, and they're they know what they want to express, and I think that is very obvious and very strong. And when you're watching, you do understand it, and I think the fact that they're using a very simple formula, I guess. I've always said less is more, and I think this is another time when it really shines through, because it's letting them do all the work. All the actors are doing the work with their expressions, the way they say their lines, and you can tell they all have this chemistry because it feels so real. You really genuinely believe that they are their characters. And Elizabeth Montgomery, I know she's been acting like her father was also an actor. And I don't actually know a lot about Dick York. I just realized that, but I know a lot about Elizabeth Montgomery and Agnes Moorehead, and they're both really good actors. I think they do such a phenomenal job.
Didn't he suffer with a lot of back pain?
Yeah, they had actually on set. They created.
That's later on.
They created special furniture for him just so he could be comfortable on set.
Wow. I thought it was from the get-go.
I mean, for me, I think that I thought for a show, for a comedy series of this ilk, I think that these episodes, normally what you get with a comedy series, you kind of get the pilot, whether you're looking at the Brady Bunch, Partridge Family, The Monkees,
right,
or, Leave It to Beaver, or I Dream of Jeannie, or whatever. Well, normally what you have is they have a pilot episode, and then all of a sudden it's like, then you kind of thrown in sort of thing. But Bewitched is differently because, I've seen these episodes hundreds of times. And when I was reviewing what we're going to do for season 4, and when Bewitched came up, I've started watching all the shows and seeing that to see if this would be something that we could actually cover and do a good job with. And I said there, so I've seen these episodes multiple times. And that's not including the times I've been home ill and it plays on Channel 4 during the day. Exactly. And the times I watched it when I was growing up on restricted repeats. And what I liked about this is basically that I didn't realize until watching it now, because now it's just probably the first time I'm actually watching things in order. Because normally I'm so used to you kind of Bewitched is like a comfy pair of slippers. You put them on, you kind of put the duvet around you, you wrap yourself on, and then you turn the TV and Bewitched will be on. You're never quite sure, unless you see what Darren is saying.
It's a comfy pair of sneakers. You
never know what season, but you never know what season you're in, are you? Unless until
would you? No, you wouldn't know, would you?
No, not really. So I think this is the first time I've actually started looking at things and watching them in chronological order. And I had to sit there and say, for a show of this ilk, to sit there and first of all, wade you in bit by bit, and as they're like unraveling something, and there's almost, it's almost like kind of a soap opera kind of thing, really, which is kind of strange. That we meet Darren, we meet Endora, we meet Darren. Next episode, we're buying a house, and now we met the neighbors. Okay, and then the next episode after that, it's like, now we met Larry Tate, who's going to become a big part of the show. This is Darren's world. Now the next one, so now it's like, and now we're expanding this world sort of thing. And then the next one, of course, Darren meets Endora, but then we also get a little bit more of the neighborhood and stuff like this. And I find it very interesting that we're taking steps into this world, and they're doing it gradually.
It is like world building. It's world building in a way that is it's world building in a way that a sitcom doesn't typically do. They don't really take the time necessarily to always do that. And so
you're just thrown in the middle of it, aren't you? So I think another thing I think that makes this episodes work a lot is because that there's also a lot of love in the show. And I have to sit there and say, I don't think I've ever experienced watching a show seeing so much love between the main characters, between Samantha and Darren, and seeing that love right from the beginning and carrying it through. And there's just so much love, and you see the love between Endora and the daughter. And I have to sit there and say, it just kind of fills you up with so much love, warmth, and you can't help but smile through the whole situation. Sort of thing. So that brings us to the end of the Literary License Podcast. Our first episode will be Bewitched, Season 1, Episodes 1 through 4. Next month, we'll be covering Episodes 5 through 8. And we'll also be doing a crossover with the Flintstones with their episode of Samantha, which was a crossover to help people who are really into the Flintstones watch Bewitched. And another thing to be interested in knowing that Hanna-Barbera did the opening credits for this, and that's the reason why there's a crossover. So we'll also be covering Samantha as well. Next week, we'll be starting our Nature versus Man with 2 films by Lloyd Kaufman. And we'll be doing Toxic Avenger and Class of Nukem High about how nature kicks man's ass every time man messes with it. And of course, we'll also be having a Lloyd Kaufman interview that'll be special to everyone that'll be listening to our podcast. And Lloyd Kaufman, for our newbies out there, is the writer, director, and producer of Trauma Films. And we'll be talking to him about his career, how he got started, and his very interesting life. And that will be the interview, and that should be out by Wednesday. And then, of course, we'll be covering our Dark Shadows Day of the month. And then, of course, next month, we'll be doing our next classic novel to screen, which will be Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. But if you're a Bewitched fan, you want to continue with our Bewitched, that'll be next month, be episodes 5 through 8, and covering the Flintstones Samantha episode. So that's good night for myself. A good night, Vicki.
Good night, guys.
Good night, Jesse.
Have a good night, everyone.
And we'll see you next week with Nurture versus Man, The Toxic Avenger.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. Until next time, and do not forget to comment or share. We would so admirably appreciate your support.